Story Narae, the art of storytelling.
Welcome to part 3 of The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, brought to you by Story Narae. The journey grows more dangerous and courage is tested. Will Dorothy and her friends reach the wizard? Chapter 13 Rescue. The Cowardly Lion was very happy when he heard that the Wicked Witch had melted into a bucket of water. Dorothy immediately opened our door and let the lion out, and then they returned to the witch's castle together. The first thing Dorothy did there was to call all the Winkies together and tell them that the witch was dead and that they were no longer slaves. All the Winkies cheered and rejoiced greatly. They worked hard as slaves of an evil witch for a very long time, and the witch always treated them very cruelly. They decided to celebrate this day as a memorial for eternity and spend the day with banquets and balls. The lion said, "I wish our friends the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were with us now." Dorothy asked worriedly.
"Can't we save them?"
The lion answered.
"Let's give it a try."
They called the Winkies and asked if they could help rescue their friends. The Winkies replied that they would gladly do everything in their power to help Dorothy escape her slavery. So Dorothy picked out a few of the smartest-looking Winkies and set off with them. They walked all day that day and half a day the next day before they finally reached the rocky field where the Tin Woodman lay broken and crumpled from his fall. The axe was near the Tin Woodman, but the blade was rusty and the handle was broken. Dorothy could not help but shed tears at the sight of her old friend's miserable appearance, and the lion looked solemnly at the woodcutter with a pitiful heart. The Winkies carefully lifted the woodcutter and carried him to the Yellow Castle. When they returned to the castle, Dorothy asked the Winkies,
"Are there any blacksmiths among you?"
"Oh, of course. There are some very skilled blacksmiths, tinsmiths."
"Then call them."
And Dorothy said. When the blacksmiths came with their tools, Dorothy asked them,
"Straighten the dents of this Tin Woodman, restore his bent shape, and fix the broken parts."
The blacksmiths carefully examined the woodcutter and answered that they thought they could fix him back to how he was before. They set up a workshop in one of the castle's large yellow rooms and began work. For 3 days and 3 nights they hammered, straightened, bent, soldered, polished, and pounded the Tin Woodman's limbs, torso, and head until they had restored them to their former state. The connecting parts have also been made to work as smoothly as before. There were some marks of soldering here and there, but the blacksmiths had done such a good job. And the woodcutter wasn't a very vain person, so he didn't care at all. The woodcutter walked into Dorothy's room and thanked her for saving him, then cried with joy. Fortunately, his joints remained unrusted, as Dorothy quickly wiped the tears from the woodcutter's face with the apron she was wearing. At the same time, Dorothy was filled with joy at seeing her old friend again and shed tears like rain. Of course, there was no need to wipe away these tears. The lion next to him also kept wiping away tears until his tail was completely wet. So in the end the lion had to go out into the yard and stand there with his tail raised until it dried in the sun. When Dorothy told him everything that had happened, the Tin Woodman said,
"I would be really happy if Scarecrow could be with us again."
"Let's find him together."
And Dorothy said. Dorothy asked the Winkies for help again. They had to walk for a day and a half before they reached the base of a tall tree where the winged monkeys had thrown the Scarecrow's clothes. The tree was very tall and its bark was so smooth that it was not easy to climb. Then the woodcutter came forward.
"If I cut down the tree, I can find the Scarecrow's clothes."
Among the Winkies, there was a goldsmith, and while the blacksmiths were repairing the woodcutter, he replaced the broken axe handle with solid gold. And the other Winkies sharpened the axe blade until all the rust was gone and it shined like silver. As soon as the woodcutter spoke, he began to cut down the tree, and soon the tree fell down with a loud crack. At the same time, the bundle of Scarecrow's clothes hanging from the end of a tree branch fell and rolled on the ground. Dorothy picked up a bundle of clothes. The Winkies took it to the castle and filled it with clean, good rags. Then, look. The Scarecrow regained its former appearance and went around thanking the people who saved it again and again. Now Dorothy and her friends are back together and spending happy days at the Yellow Castle. There was no shortage of anything there, so I was able to live comfortably. But one day Dorothy thought of Aunt Em and told her friends.
"Now we can go back to Oz and tell him to keep his promise."
The woodcutter said.
"That's right, I finally got a heart."
"I can get a brain, you know."
And the Scarecrow said in a joyful voice.
And then I can find courage.
And the Lion said in a thoughtful voice.
And then I can go back to Kansas.
Dorothy clapped her hands and shouted.
Okay, let's leave for Emerald City tomorrow.
At these words, everyone decided to do so. The next day they said goodbye to the Winkies. The Winkies were sad to see them leave. They especially liked the Tin Woodman so much that they begged him to stay and rule the West Country and the Yellow Castle. But when they insisted on leaving, the Winkies gave Toto and the Lion a gold necklace. He also gave Dorothy a beautiful bracelet decorated with diamonds. The Scarecrow was given a walking stick with a gold head to prevent him from falling while walking, and the Tin Woodman was given a silver oil can decorated with gold and precious stones. Dorothy and her friends all said their thanks and shook hands with the Winkies until their arms hurt. Dorothy went to the witch's kitchen shelf and filled her basket with food for the trip. Dorothy saw the golden cap there and tried it on her head, and it fit perfectly. Dorothy knew nothing about the magic hidden in the golden cap, but she was so pretty that she decided to wear it and put her original hat in the basket. When all preparations for the trip were complete, they set off for the Emerald City. The Winkies cheered them on and wished them luck. Chapter 14 Winged Monkeys. You will remember that there is no way between the Wicked Witch's castle and the Emerald City. The witch, who saw Dorothy and her friends coming with her magical eyes, sent winged monkeys to bring them to her. Since Dorothy was carried to the castle by the winged monkeys, it was quite difficult for her to find her way to the Emerald City across the wide fields of buttercups and yellow daisies. Of course, they knew they had to go straight to the east where the sun rises, so they were able to go in the right direction at first. But at noon the sun rose over their heads, and they began to get confused as to which was east and which was west. Eventually they got lost in the vast plains, but they kept walking without stopping, and soon a bright moonlit night came. They lay among the fragrant yellow flowers and slept soundly until morning, of course, except for the Scarecrow and the Tin Man. The next morning, the sun did not appear, hidden behind the clouds, but they set out as if they knew exactly where to go. Dorothy said,
If I keep walking like this, I'll get somewhere someday.
But after many days, they saw nothing but fields before them. The Scarecrow began to grumble a little.
It's clear we're lost. If I don't find my way to the Emerald City in time, I'll be brainless.
The Tin Woodman said,
I can't receive a heart either. I can't wait any longer to get to Oz. I'm sure you guys will agree that this is a really long trip.
Even the Cowardly Lion spoke with a sobbing tone.
As you know, I don't have the courage to keep walking without knowing where I'll end up.
When Dorothy heard this, she lost her courage. She sat down on the grass and looked at her friends. Her friends also sat down and faced Dorothy. Toto was so tired that he didn't chase a butterfly that passed by him for the first time in his life. Toto stuck out his tongue, panted, and looked at Dorothy with an expression that seemed to ask what to do. Dorothy suggested,
What if we call the rats? They probably know the way to the Emerald City.
The Scarecrow shouted.
Yeah, definitely. Why didn't I think of that until now?
Dorothy blew the little whistle she had been wearing around her neck since she had received it from the Queen of the Mouse. After a while, there was a sound of small feet running, and a large number of small grey mice appeared in front of Dorothy. The Queen Mouse, standing between them, asked in a squeaky voice, How can I help you, friends? Dorothy answered,
We are lost. Could you tell me the way to Emerald City?
The Queen answered, Of course, but it's very far from here. It's going to take a long time to get back. And the Queen of the Mice pointed to the golden cap that Dorothy was wearing and said, But why didn't you use the magic of the golden cap to summon the winged monkeys? They would have transported you to the city of Oz in less than an hour. Dorothy replied in surprise,
I had no idea hats had magic. What is that magic?
The Queen of the Rat answered, There is a spell written inside the golden hat. But if you call the winged monkeys, we'll have to run far away. They are very mischievous and really enjoy teasing us. Dorothy asked curiously,
Won't they hurt us?
Oh, no, they must absolutely obey anyone wearing the golden hat. Then, take care. The Queen who said so immediately disappeared in a hurry along with all the other mice. When Dorothy looked inside the golden cap, she saw words written on the lining. Dorothy thought it was definitely an order. Read the instructions carefully, then put her hat back on. Dorothy stood on her left foot and recited the spell.
Ep, Pepe, cocktail.
What on earth are you talking about?
The Scarecrow said, not knowing what Dorothy was doing.
Hilo, alone, hello.
Dorothy continued to recite the spell, this time standing on her right foot only.
Hello.
And the Tin Woodman answered quietly.
Gigi, Yoji, Chjong.
Dorothy stood on both feet for the last time and said, as soon as the spell was finished, there was a loud noise and the sound of flapping wings, and at the same time a flock of winged monkeys flew towards them. The chief monkey bowed to Dorothy and asked,
What are your orders?
Dorothy answered,
We want to go to the Emerald City. We are lost.
We will take you there.
As soon as the captain finished answering, the two monkeys took flight with Dorothy sitting on their arms. Other monkeys also caught the Scarecrow, the woodcutter, and the lion and went up into the air. A little monkey caught Toto even though he tried to bite him and ran after the other monkeys. The Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman were terrified as they remembered the evil deeds the winged monkeys had done to them in the past. But nothing happened as they feared, so they felt good as they flew through the sky on their monkeys. I had a great time looking at the beautiful fields and forests spread out far below my feet. Dorothy was sitting comfortably between two large monkeys, one of whom was the leader. They made their arms into a chair and were carefully carrying Dorothy. Dorothy asked,
Why did you follow the orders of the owner of the golden cap?
The chief monkey answered with a laugh.
That would be a long story. But there's still a long way to go, so if you want, we can spend some time talking about it while we're there.
Dorothy answered.
I really want to hear it.
The chief monkey began to tell a story.
In the past we lived freely. They lived happily in the forest, flying from tree to tree, eating fruits and nuts, and doing whatever they wanted without anyone telling them to do so. Some of us may have been a bit too playful back then. Going down to the ground and pulling the tails of wingless animals, chasing birds, and throwing hard berries at people passing through the forest. But we were careless and just enjoyed each day, finding happiness and fun. This is a story from long ago, long before Oz appeared from the clouds and ruled this land. At that time, there was a beautiful princess in the northern country, who was also a great magician. The princess used all her magic only to help people and never harmed a good person. The princess's name was Galet, and she lived in a magnificent palace built of large rubies. Everyone loved that princess, but her greatest sorrow was that she could not find a man who would love her. Because all the men at that time were too stupid and ugly to be married to such a beautiful and wise princess. But finally the princess found a young, handsome, manly and wise boy. Galet decided that when the boy was of marriageable age, she would take him as her husband. So she brought the boy to the Ruby Palace and used all her magic to make him a strong, kind, and loving man that any woman would fall in love with. The boy, who was called Kurala, was considered the wisest and best groom in all the land when he grew up. He was such a wonderful man that Galet fell in love with him and made all the preparations for marriage. At that time, my grandfather was the leader of the winged monkeys who lived in the forest near Galet's palace. He was a man who loved pranks more than a good dinner. The day before the wedding, my grandfather was flying with his colleagues and saw Kurala walking along the river. He was wearing a magnificent suit of pink silk and purple velvet. Grandpa wondered how he would react if he played a prank on him. Following the grandfather's words, the monkeys caught Quailala and flew him to the middle of the river, dropping him into the water. His grandfather said to him, "Come swim out and see, my wonderful friend. I wonder what happens to your clothes when they get wet." Kurala wasn't so smart that he couldn't swim, and he wasn't so stupid that he ruined all his luck. He came up to the surface, laughed loudly, and swam to the riverbank. But then Galet ran out there and saw his gorgeous clothes in disarray in the river. The princess was angry, and of course I knew who did it. The princess called all the winged monkeys together before her. And at first he said he would tie the monkeys' wings tightly and throw them into the river just like they did to Kurala. The grandfather, who knew that if he tied his wings and threw him into the river, he would surely drown, earnestly begged for forgiveness. Kurala also said to forgive them. So instead of forgiving them, Princess Galet made a condition. The winged monkeys were now obliged to grant 3 requests from the person who had the golden cap. This hat was made to be given to Kurala as a wedding gift. It is rumored that the princess sold half of her kingdom to make a hat. Anyway, my grandfather and all the other monkeys immediately accepted the condition. So we have become subject to the owner of the golden cap 3 times, whoever that may be.
What happened to those two?
Dorothy asked with great interest in the story. The monkey answered.
Kerala, the first owner of the golden cap, gave us his first command. Since his bride did not want to see us, he called us to the forest. After marrying the princess and told us to always be careful not to let the winged monkeys see the princess. We were so scared of the princess that we willingly followed the order. We continued to live quietly like that until the golden cap fell into the hands of the Wicked Witch of the West. The Wicked Witch called us to enslave the Winkies and then drive Oz out of the land of the West. Now you are the owner of the golden hat. You can give us 3 commands.
When the story of the great ape was over, Dorothy looked down. The sparkling green walls of the Emerald City stood before them. Dorothy was amazed that the monkeys could fly so fast. But I was even happier that the trip was over. The monkeys were carefully placed in front of the gates of the Emerald City. The chief monkey bowed to Dorothy and quickly flew away with his companions. Dorothy said,
It was a really great trip.
The lion answered.
Yeah, I didn't think the arduous journey would end this quickly. I'm so glad you brought that amazing hat.
Chapter 15 The Horrible Was Exposed. Our 4 travelers walked up to the great gates of the Emerald City and rang the bell. After the bell rang a few times, the gatekeeper we had met before opened the gate. He said in surprise.
Oh, my, you're back again?
The scarecrow answered.
What's the problem?
I thought you were going to find the Wicked Witch of the West.
The scarecrow said.
Of course I met a witch.
The goalkeeper asked with a tone of surprise.
Are you saying that the witch let you go back?
The scarecrow explained.
The witch couldn't help it. It completely melted away.
The goalkeeper said.
It melted. Oh, that's really good news. But who made the witch melt?
The lion spoke solemnly.
Dorothy did.
Oh, what a blessing this is.
The goalkeeper gave a gasp and bowed deeply to Dorothy. The goalkeeper led them to his room and, as he had done before, took out a pair of glasses from a large box and put them in their eyes. After a while, Dorothy and her friends passed through the gate and entered the Emerald City. The people heard through the water gatekeeper that Dorothy had melted the Wicked Witch of the West. So many people came out in droves and followed Dorothy and her friends to the Palace of Oz. The green-bearded soldier was still guarding the palace gates, but as soon as I saw them I let them in. They also met the pretty green girl again, who guided them each to the room they had previously stayed in. So Dorothy and her friends could rest until the Great Oz was ready to meet them. The soldier immediately relayed the news to Oz that Dorothy and her party had returned from defeating the Wicked Witch. But Oz had no answer. Dorothy and her friends thought the Great Wizard would come see them immediately, but he didn't. The next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, I heard nothing from Oz. They were getting more and more irritated and tired because of the long wait. Finally, they were very angry at Oz for sending them to do hard and difficult work and then treating them so badly when they came back. So the scarecrow asked the green girl to send a message to Oz saying that if he did not meet them immediately, he would call the winged monkeys for help and wait and see whether Oz would keep his promise or not. The Wizard of Oz was terrified when he received this message. So I told them to come to the audience room at 904 tomorrow morning. Oz had been attacked by winged monkeys once in the Western Land and had no desire to meet them again. Dorothy's friends couldn't sleep that night because they were thinking about the gifts Oz had promised them. Dorothy fell asleep alone and dreamed she was in Kansas. In the dream, Aunt Em was telling Dorothy how happy she was to be back. The next morning, at 9 o'clock, a green-bearded soldier came to pick them up. After 4 minutes they all entered the Great Oz's throne room. Of course, each of them thought the wizard would appear in the form they had seen before. So everyone was very surprised when they saw no one in the room. They stood close to each other near the door. The still silence of the empty room was more frightening than anything they had ever seen before in Oz. Then suddenly a solemn voice was heard. The voice seemed to come from somewhere on top of a large roof.
I am Oz, the great and terrible. Why have you come to me?
They looked around the room again, but still no one was there. Dorothy asked,
Where are you?
The voice answered,
I am everywhere, but it is invisible to the eyes of ordinary humans. Now I will sit on my throne, so you can talk to me.
Then the voice really seemed to come from the throne. So they walked to where the throne was and stood in a single line. Dorothy said,
Lord Oz, I have come to ask you to keep your promise to us.
What promise?
And Oz answered. Dorothy said,
You promised that if I killed the Wicked Witch, you would send me back to Kansas.
You said you would give me a brain.
And the Scarecrow said,
You promised to give me your heart.
and the Tin Woodman said,
You promised to give me courage.
even the Cowardly Lion said. When the voice asked,
Is the Wicked Witch really dead?
Dorothy thought the voice trembled a little. Dorothy answered.
Yes, I melted the witch with a bucket of water.
The voice said,
Oh my, this is really amazing. Good night. I need some time to think about it, so come back tomorrow.
The Tin Woodman said angrily.
You've had enough time already.
The Scarecrow said.
We can't wait a single day longer.
Dorothy cried out.
Keep the promises you made to us.
The lion thought it would be a good idea to scare the wizard, so he roared very loudly. The sound was so fierce and scary that Toto jumped in surprise and ran away, crashing into the partition in the corner. The partition fell down in front of them with a thud, and in the next moment they were all filled with surprise, because I saw a small, old man with a bald head and wrinkled face standing in the space hidden by the partition. He seemed just as surprised as Dorothy and her friends. The Tin Woodman raised his axe and rushed at the little man, shouting.
Who are you?
The little man spoke in a trembling voice.
I am Oz, the great and terrible. So don't hurt me. I'll give you whatever you want. Just don't hurt me.
Our friends looked at the man in surprise and disappointment. Dorothy said.
I thought Oz had a big head.
The Scarecrow said.
I thought you were a beautiful fairy.
The Tin Woodman said.
I thought Oz was a scary beast.
The lion also spoke loudly.
I thought Oz was a ball of fire.
The little man said apologetically.
No, you are all wrong. I fooled you into believing that...
Dorothy screamed.
You lied to me. Aren't you a great wizard?
Shh, don't talk so loud, miss. If anyone eavesdrops, I'm finished. I was just pretending to be a great wizard.
Dorothy asked.
So you're saying he's not a wizard?
Not at all, little miss. I'm just an ordinary person.
The Scarecrow said.
You are worse than that. You are a scammer.
The little man spoke confidently, rubbing his hands together as if he were happy.
That's correct. Yeah, I'm a scammer.
The Tin Woodman said.
But this is too much. Can I never have a heart again?
What about my courage?
And the lion said.
My brain?
The Scarecrow sobbed, wiping his tears with his sleeve. Oz said.
Friends, I hope you won't talk about this today. Please consider my position too. If this gets out, there'll be big problems.
Dorothy asked.
Doesn't anyone know that you're a scammer?
Oz answered.
No one knows except you four and me. I thought I'd never get caught because I'd been fooling everyone for so long. But my biggest mistake was letting you all into the audience room.
Even my subjects cannot see me, so they believe me to be some kind of scary being. Dorothy asked, bewildered.
But I don't understand. How did you appear to me with that big head?
Oz answered.
That's one of my tricks. Okay, follow me this way. I'll explain everything to you.
He led them into a small room at the back of the audience room. I looked in the direction he was pointing and saw a large head made of several layers of thick paper and carefully painted. Oz explained.
I tie this to a string and hang it from the ceiling, and I hide behind a partition and pull the string to make the eyes move and the mouth open.
Dorothy asked.
Then how does that voice come about?
The little man said.
Oh, I am a ventriloquist. I can make my voice heard wherever I want. So that's why you think the voice is coming from that head. There are more things I used to deceive you here.
Oz showed the Scarecrow the mask and dress he used to disguise himself as a beautiful fairy. The Tin Woodman discovered that the terrible beast he had seen was nothing more than a series of pieces of leather sewn together to form a plank, and the fireball was also hung from the ceiling by a fake wizard. The cotton ball was soaked in oil, and when set on fire, it would burn brightly. The Scarecrow said.
Oh, really, you should be ashamed of yourself for being a fraud.
The little man answered in a sad tone.
I feel ashamed. I'm a real scammer. But that was all I could do. Okay, there are plenty of chairs, so let's all sit down. Let me tell you my story.
They all sat down and listened to the following story.
I was born in Omaha.
Dorothy shouted.
Oh my, that's not far from Kansas.
Oz shook his head with a sad expression and said.
Yeah, but it's very far from here. When I became an adult, I trained under a master of ventriloquism and became a ventriloquist. I can imitate any kind of bird or beast.
And then he really started to meow like a cat, and Toto pricked up his ears and looked around to find where the cat was. Oz continued his story.
After a while, I got tired of that job and became a hot air balloon pilot.
Dorothy asked.
What is that?
Oz explained.
He's the guy who goes up in a hot air balloon on the day of the circus to attract people to come see the circus.
Dorothy said.
Oh, I think I get it.
One day, I went up on a machine, but the rope got tangled and I couldn't get back down. So I went up to the clouds, and there I was hit by a strong wind and was carried a long, long way. After flying for a full day and a full night, when I woke up on the second morning, the balloon was floating over a very strange and beautiful country. I was able to get down to the ground without getting hurt at all because the machine was going down little by little. But I soon found myself surrounded by strange people. They must have thought I was a great wizard when they saw me coming down from the clouds. Of course, I let them think that way, because they were afraid of me and promised to do whatever I wanted. So I ordered this city and my palace to be built for my pleasure and to keep these good people busy so that they would not pay attention to me. They all did the job willingly and very well. This country was so green and so beautiful that I named it the Emerald City. And then I thought it would be nice to make everyone wear green glasses to match the name, so everything would look green.
Dorothy asked.
So, isn't everything here green?
Oz answered.
It's no different from other cities, but because you're wearing green glasses, everything looks green. The Emerald City was founded a long time ago. When the hot air balloon brought me here, I was a young man, but now I am a very old man. My people have been living with green glasses on their eyes for so long that most of them don't think the Emerald City is real. Of course, this city is a really beautiful place, rich in gems and precious metals, and overflowing with all the good things that make us happy. Also, everyone likes me because I have ruled the people well. But after the palace was built, I closed the door and didn't show myself to anyone. The thing I feared most was witches. I have no magical powers whatsoever. But I quickly learned that the witches here can do truly amazing things with magic. There are 4 witches in this country, each ruling over the people living in the east, west, south, and north. Fortunately, the witches of the north and the south were good witches and did not harm me at all. But the witches of the east and the west were so evil that if they hadn't thought I had more power than them, they would have definitely destroyed me. Because of that, I lived in fear of them for a long time. So you can imagine how happy I was when I heard that your house had fallen on the wicked witch of the east, and she had died. When you came to me, I was willing to give you anything as long as you could get rid of the other evil witches. But now that you've melted the witch away, I'm ashamed to say that I can't keep my promise.
Dorothy said.
You are a really bad person.
Oh no, miss. I am a really good person. But he's a very bad wizard. I admit that.
The Scarecrow asked.
Then can you give me a brain too?
You don't need a brain, because you learn something every day. Babies have brains, but they don't know much. Experience is the only way to acquire knowledge. As long as you live on this earth, you will surely have more experiences.
The Scarecrow said.
That is true, but I would be very unhappy if you did not give me a brain.
The fake wizard stared at the Scarecrow for a long time, and then he sighed and said.
Okay, like I said, I'm not a great wizard, but if you come back tomorrow morning, I'll put a brain in your head. But I can't tell you how to use it. You have to figure that out yourself.
The Scarecrow shouted.
Oh, thank you, thank you. I'll figure out how to use my brain well. Don't worry.
The Lion asked anxiously.
Then what about my courage?
Oz answered.
I'm sure you already have enough courage.
What you need is confidence in yourself. There is not a single living creature in the world that is not afraid when faced with danger. True courage is to face danger even though you are afraid. In that respect, you are already brave enough.
The Lion said.
Maybe so, but I'm still scared. If you don't give me the courage to forget my fears, I will be truly miserable.
Oz answered.
Okay, then I'll give you that courage tomorrow.
The Tin Woodman asked.
What's happening to my heart?
Oz answered.
Well, speaking of that, I think there's something wrong with you wanting a heart. The mind makes most people unhappy. If you know that, it's actually lucky that you don't have feelings for me.
The Tin Woodman said.
It's just a difference of opinion. If you give me a heart, I will endure any misfortune without complaining.
Oz readily agreed.
Good. If you come back tomorrow, I'll give you my heart. I've been a wizard for a long time, so I might as well do it a little longer.
Dorothy said.
So now I can go back to Kansas?
The little man answered.
Let's think about that problem together. Give me 2 or 3 days to think about it. I'll find a way to cross the desert. During this time, you will be treated with the utmost respect as my guests, and while you reside in this palace, you will be served by my people. If it's a small wish, they'll try to grant anything. It's not that great, but this is my answer to those of you who want my help. Please keep my secret and be careful not to tell anyone that I am a fraud."
They promised not to tell anyone what they had learned and went back to their rooms in good spirits. Dorothy even had hopes that this great and fearsome conman would find a way to return to Kansas. If that were the case, Dorothy would gladly forgive him for all his wrongdoings. Chapter 16: The Magic of the Great Deceiver. The next morning the Scarecrow said to his friends,
Congratulate me, I finally got a brain from Oz. When I come back I'll be just like everyone else.
Dorothy spoke honestly.
I always liked you just the way you are.
The Scarecrow answered,
I really appreciate you liking a mere scarecrow. But when you hear the wonderful thoughts my new brain produces, you will definitely think of me as something more than that.
The Scarecrow greeted his friends in a cheerful voice and went to the audience room and knocked on the door. Oz said,
"Come in."
The Scarecrow entered the audience room and saw the little man sitting by the window, deep in thought. The Scarecrow said with a little anxiety,
I came to get a brain.
Oz answered,
"Oh yeah, sit on that chair. I'm going to take your head off for a moment, so please understand. You have to do that to get your brain into its proper place in your head."
The Scarecrow answered,
It's okay, you can take my head off any time as long as it gets better when you put it back on.
So the wizard took off the Scarecrow's head and took out all the rags inside. Then he went into the back room and brought out a bag of chaff mixed with pins and needles. After shaking it for a while to mix the chaff and needles well, I put it on the top of the Scarecrow's head and filled the remaining empty space with rags to make sure it stayed in place. The wizard said as he reattached the Scarecrow's head to its body.
"I have given you a new brain full of chaff, so from now on, you will be a great person."
The Scarecrow was very happy and proud to have his biggest wish come true. After expressing his sincere gratitude to Oz, he returned to his friends. Dorothy looked at the Scarecrow with curious eyes. The Scarecrow's head had a very bulging upper part where the brain was. Dorothy asked,
How are you feeling?
The Scarecrow answered seriously,
I feel like I've gotten really smarter. Now if I use my brain I will be able to know everything.
The Tin Woodman asked.
Why are those needles and pins sticking out of your head?
The Lion spoke his mind.
That must be proof that he is that sharp.
Okay, now I have to go get the heart from Oz.
After saying that, the woodcutter walked to the audience room and knocked on the door.
"Come in."
As Oz spoke, the woodcutter entered the audience room.
I came to receive a heart.
The little man answered.
"Oh yeah, but to put your heart in the right place, I'll have to cut a hole in your chest. I hope you don't get sick too much."
The woodcutter answered.
No, it's okay, because I don't feel any pain at all.
Oz took a pair of tinsmith's scissors and made a small, square hole in the Tin Woodman's left chest. Then he went to the dresser and took out a very pretty heart made entirely of silk and filled with sawdust. Oz asked.
"Isn't this really pretty?"
The woodcutter answered with great joy.
It's really pretty, but is that heart kind?
"Oh, that's right."
And Oz answered. Oz placed the heart into the woodcutter's chest and reattached it by soldering the cut piece of tin back into place. Oz said,
"Now, you have a heart that anyone would be proud of. I'm sorry for leaving a scar on your heart, but it really couldn't be helped."
The happy woodcutter said,
Don't worry about that. Thank you so much. I will never forget your kindness.
"You don't have to say that."
The Tin Woodman went back to his friends, and they all celebrated his good fortune. Now the Lion went to the audience room and knocked on the door.
"Come in."
And Oz answered. The Lion said as he entered the audience room.
I came to gain courage.
The little man said.
"Okay, I'll give you courage."
Oz went to the shelf, reached into the top shelf, and took out a square green bottle. Then he poured the contents into a beautifully decorated green and gold dish. When he put the plate down in front of the cowardly Lion, the Lion sniffed around to see what it was. The wizard said.
"Drink.
The Lion asked.
What is this?
Oz answered.
This will enter your body and become courage. Of course, as you know, courage is always within you. So if you don't swallow this, it will be useless. I like to drink it as quickly as possible."
The Lion did not hesitate any longer and drank everything in the plate. Oz asked.
"How are you feeling?"
I feel full of courage.
The Lion answered. yes, and went back to his friends, telling them about his good fortune. Left alone, Oz smiled as he thought of his success in granting the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and the Lion exactly what they had asked for. Oz talked to himself.
How can I not be a fraud? Everyone wants me to do things that no one else can do. It was easy to make the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Woodcutter happy, because they thought I could do anything. But sending Dorothy back to Kansas won't be possible with imagination alone. I'm not sure what to do with it.
Chapter 17 How the Instrument was Launched. There was no word from Oz for 3 days. Although all his friends were happy and very content, it was a gloomy day for the little girl. The Scarecrow said that his head was full of wonderful thoughts, but he didn't want to say what he thought, saying that no one would understand it except himself. The Tin Woodman walked around, feeling his heart pounding in his chest. He told Dorothy that he seemed to have a more compassionate and gentle heart than he had when he was human. The Lion said that he was now free from fear in the world and could easily face an army or 12 fierce co-leaders. While everyone else was content, Dorothy was anxious every day, wondering when she would be able to return to Kansas. On the 4th day, Oz called Dorothy over to him with great joy. When Dorothy entered the audience room, he greeted her cheerfully.
Sit here, miss. I think I finally found a way to leave this country.
Dorothy asked with eagerness.
Can I go back to Kansas?
Oz answered.
Well, I can't tell which side Kansas is on, but first thing we have to do is cross the desert. Then you can find your way home.
Dorothy asked.
How can I cross the desert?
The little man said.
Well, let me tell you what I think. As you know, I came to this country by hot air balloon. You two have been flying through the sky in a whirlwind. So I think the best way to cross the desert is to fly in the sky. Of course, creating a whirlwind is beyond my ability. But after thinking about it carefully, I think I could make a hot air balloon.
How? Oh?
And Dorothy asked. Oz said.
Make a large balloon out of silk cloth, put glue on it, and fill the balloon with gas. There is a lot of silk in the palace, so making the equipment is no problem. But the problem is that this country doesn't have the gas to fill the balloon to make it float.
Dorothy said strongly.
If you can't float a device, it's useless.
Oz answered.
Of course not. But there are other ways to float the device. It's filling with hot air. But hot air isn't as good as gas. If the air cools down and becomes cold, we might fall into the desert and get lost.
Dorothy screamed in surprise.
Us? Will you come with me?
Oz answered.
Yeah, I'll go too. I'm tired of living like this as a scammer. If I leave this palace, the people will soon realize that I am not a wizard and will be angry at me for deceiving them all this time. So I had no choice but to stay locked in this room all day. I'm sick of that now. So I want to go back to Kansas with you and work in the circus again.
Dorothy said.
I'm glad you're coming with me.
Oz answered.
Thanks. Now, help me sew the silks together. Let's start making our own device.
Dorothy took up a needle and thread. Then Oz cut the silk cloth into the right shape and sewed them skillfully. At first it was light green silk, then dark green, then emerald silk. Oz seemed to be thinking of making the device using fabrics of various shades. It took 3 days to sew all the pieces of cloth. The finished green silk balloon was over 6 meters long. Oz coated the inside of the balloon with a thin layer of fish glue to prevent air from escaping. When that was done, the balloon said it was ready.
Okay, now we need a basket to ride in.
Oz sent a green-bearded soldier to bring a large basket of clothes. He tied the lower part of the balloon tightly to the basket with several ropes. When all preparations were complete, Oz announced to his people that he was going to visit the wizard brothers who lived in the clouds. The news spread very quickly throughout the city, and everyone gathered to see the amazing sight. Oz ordered the apparatus to be moved to the palace courtyard. People looked at the device with curious eyes. Oz lit a fire with the wood the Tin Woodman had brought in. Then he held the balloon over the fire with the bottom part facing upward and waited for the hot air to fill the silk bag. The balloon gradually inflated and the device rose into the air. The basket was barely touching the ground. Oz climbed into the basket and spoke to all the people in a loud voice.
I will now leave to visit my brother. While I am away, a scarecrow will rule over you. I command you to obey him as you have obeyed me.
The device was now pulled taut by the rope that was tied to the ground. The air inside the balloon was so hot that it was lighter than the air outside. So if it hadn't been tied to a rope, it would have risen into the sky. The wizard shouted.
Come on, Dorothy. Hurry up or the balloon will float away.
I can't find Toto, Oh,
Dorothy couldn't leave her puppy behind. Toto was running through the crowd after the cat, and Dorothy finally found him, picked him up, and ran towards the machine. When Dorothy was only a few steps away from the balloon, Oz reached out to help her into the basket. Just then, with a snap, the rope snapped. The device ascended into the sky, leaving Dorothy behind. Dorothy screamed.
come back. I want to go too. Ooh.
Oz shouted from the basket.
I can't let you go back down, miss. I'm fine.
Have a nice trip.
Everyone greeted loudly, and he looked up and watched the wizard ascend further and further into the sky in his basket. Since then, no one has seen the Great Wizard of Oz. No one knows whether he arrived safely in Omaha or whether he still lives there, but the people remembered him fondly and said to each other, Oz has always been our friend. When he came here, he built this beautiful Emerald City for us, and now that he is gone, he has left us a wise scarecrow to rule over us. For a long time they still mourned and regretted the loss of the Great Wizard. Chapter 18 South. Dorothy wept bitterly when she lost hope of returning to Kansas. But when I think back on it all, it seems like it was a good thing I didn't go on the plane. But it was sad that Oz was gone. It seemed like the other friends were the same. The Tin Woodman said to Dorothy,
If I don't grieve for the person who gave me a wonderful heart, I will become a person who has forgotten the grace.
I feel like crying a little because Oz is leaving. Can you wipe my tears away so I don't get rusty?
I'll be happy to do it.
Dorothy immediately brought a towel. While the Tin Woodman cried for several minutes, Dorothy carefully wiped away the tears with a towel. After the Tin Woodman stopped crying, he thanked Dorothy. Then he took out a jewel-adorned oil can and oiled himself thoroughly to prevent rust. Scarecrow is now the ruler of Emerald City. Although he was not a magician, the people were proud of him and said,
Where else in the world is there a city ruled by a puppet?
The morning after Oz left in his balloon, the four friends met in the audience room and talked about various things. The Scarecrow sat on a large throne, and his other friends stood before him in courtesy. The new ruler said,
We're not that unlucky, because this palace and the Emerald City are ours. We can do whatever we want. Just a little while ago I was on a pole in a farmer's cornfield. But now he is the ruler of a beautiful city. I am so happy with my luck.
The Tin Woodman said,
I am so happy that I have a new heart too. And in fact, this is the only thing in the world I ever wanted.
The lion also spoke humbly.
I am content to be as brave as all the beasts of the world. Not braver than that though.
The Scarecrow kept talking.
If only Dorothy were content to live in the Emerald City, we could all be happy together.
Dorothy said loudly,
But I don't want to live here. I want to go back to Kansas and live with Aunt Em and Uncle Henry.
The woodcutter asked a question.
Okay, so is there anything we can do?
The Scarecrow was lost in thought. As he thought deeply, pins and needles began to stick out of his brain. Finally, the Scarecrow said this.
What if I call the winged monkeys and ask them to carry you across the desert?
Dorothy said in a joyful voice.
I never thought of that. That's it. I'll bring you the golden hat right now.
Dorothy brought the golden cap into the audience room and recited the spell. Then the winged monkeys came in through the open window and stood beside Dorothy. When the chief monkey bowed to Dorothy, he said,
This is the second time you have called us. What do you want?
Dorothy said,
Please fly me to Kansas.
but the chief monkey shook his head.
That can't be done. We are tied to this country and cannot leave it. There has never been a winged monkey in Kansas, and there never will be. Because it doesn't belong to this country. We will gladly serve you in any way we can, but we cannot cross the desert. Well then, goodbye.
The chief monkey bowed again, then spread his wings and flew out the window with his companions. Dorothy said, sobbing in disappointment.
I wasted the magic of the golden cap. Even winged monkeys can't help me.
The woodcutter with a kind heart said.
That's really too bad.
The Scarecrow began to think again. The Scarecrow's head swelled up so horribly that Dorothy was afraid it would burst. The Scarecrow said,
Let's call the green-bearded soldier and ask for his advice.
So the soldier who was called came into the audience room as if he was scared, because when Oz was there, he never allowed anyone to enter beyond the throne room door. The Scarecrow asked the soldier,
This little girl wants to cross the desert. Is there a way?
The soldier answered,
I don't know because no one has ever crossed the desert except Oz.
Dorothy asked with eagerness.
Who else can help me?
The soldier suggested.
If it's Glinda, then maybe.
The Scarecrow asked.
Who is Glinda?
I am a witch who lives in the south. She is the most powerful of all witches and rules over the Quadlings. Besides, her castle is built near the desert, so she might know how to cross it.
Dorothy asked.
Is Glinda a good witch?
The soldier answered.
The Quadlings think she's a good witch. She is kind to everyone. Glinda is a very beautiful woman, and I have heard that she knows how to stay young despite living for a very long time.
Dorothy asked.
How can I get her last name?
The soldier answered.
There is a road that goes straight south, but it is said that there are many dangerous things for travelers. The forest is home to ferocious beasts and strange tribes that hate strangers who pass through their land. So none of the Quadlings come to the Emerald City.
As the soldier left the audience room, the Scarecrow said.
It's dangerous, but I think it would be best for Dorothy to go to the South Country and ask Glinda to help her. Of course, if Dorothy stays here, she can never go back to Kansas.
The Tin Woodman said.
Think about it again.
The Scarecrow said.
I thought about it again.
The Lion spoke proudly.
Then I will go with Dorothy. I'm sick of this city and I miss the forests and fields. As you know, I'm originally a wild animal. Besides, we need someone to protect Dorothy.
The woodcutter said.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe my axe will help Dorothy. So I also want to go to the South Country with Dorothy.
The Scarecrow asked.
So, when should we leave?
They were all surprised and asked.
Are you going too? Of course. If it weren't for Dorothy, I wouldn't have a brain. Dorothy took me down from the cornfield pole and carried me to the Emerald City. So my luck is all thanks to Dorothy. I will never leave Dorothy's side until she returns to Kansas for good.
Dorothy said gratefully.
Thank you so much. You guys are always so good to me, but I want to leave as soon as possible.
The Scarecrow answered immediately.
Then, let's leave tomorrow morning. It's going to be a long journey, so we all need to prepare now.
Hardships bring them closer, but the truth about Oz remains hidden. The journey isn't over yet. Join us again, only on Story Narae.